few weeks to the festival, preparations were heavily ongoing. The maidens were training vigorously. You would see them in small groups shaking their waists. Ugegbe showed no interest. She was always reluctant to learn the dance steps her mother taught her. It was 4 weeks to the festival and she was still unable to move her waist, which was the major criteria to secure a marriage proposal. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there was a small village called Idu. Idu was known for her beautiful maidens and strong men. But the men and women of Idu were not allowed to marry each other. They had to marry from other villages. Every year, men and women from neighboring villages came to Idu for the yearly Erure festival. In this festival, the maidens of Idu would engage in several dance competitions, and men from other villages would make their choices based on their beauty, the wideness of their hips, and their ability to move their waists effortlessly. The men, on the other hand, would display their strength by wrestling one another, breaking firewoods, and carrying heavy objects. The maidens had 3 seasons to participate in the Erure festival, and if after the third season nobody is interested in a particular maiden, she became the laughingstock of the village. But the men had several trials, so they could try as many times until someone was eventually interested in them. But in all of this, there was a particular maiden who wasn't happy with the tradition. She was in love with a man from her community, which was a taboo. Ugegbe was head over heels in love with Somto, but their relationship was forbidden. They had to keep it a secret because they knew what their fate would be if anybody found out. Ugegbe was 17 and this was supposed to be her first season. Her parents had put in so much effort in preparing her for this. Her mother taught her how to dance day and night. Ugegbe showed no interest. She was always reluctant to learn the dance steps her mother taught her. It was 4 weeks to the festival and she was still unable to move her waist, which was the major criteria to secure a marriage proposal. Her parents tried to encourage her, but she kept talking them out of it. The festival is not for me, Mama. Why can't I marry from my village? Why do you want to send me to people I don't know? How am I supposed to live without my people? She usually tells her parents. But this is our tradition. It has been like this before your great-grandparents were born. This was how I married your father, and it will continue even after your generation, her mother told her. Ugegbe knew her mother was right, but she kept persuading her to see reasons with her. Somto, on the other hand, was 20 years old, and this was his third season. His parents always told him to try and win someone's heart. Somto was in love with Ugegbe as well. He had been in love with her since they were little. She has always been the one he wanted to end up with. His first 2 seasons were chaotic. He came last in every of the competitions. Somto was physically a very strong man. He was tall and well built. Because of this, the villagers were surprised when he came last in all the competitions in the previous seasons. Deep down, Somto knew what he was doing. He was delaying until he could find a way to be with the woman of his dreams, Ugegbe. Every night, they met at the village square where their mates usually meet. They would sit close to each other, but nobody could figure out what was going on between them. They had concluded a long time ago that it was a family love since their families were super close and they thought nobody would be foolish enough to go against the traditions of Idu because they all knew the consequences. While their peers were busy practicing, Somto and Ugegbe would sneak out and spend some time alone. They would stay there until they noticed the others leaving. Ugegbe was a very beautiful girl. and she was nicely shaped. The thought of this usually made Somto jealous because he knew there was no way she would participate in the festival and men wouldn't rush her. He kept telling her, but she always assured him that she wouldn't put in any effort on that day. In fact, if any suitors tried to approach her, she would chase them away, but Somto wasn't convinced. Few weeks to the festival, preparations were heavily ongoing. The maidens were training vigorously. You would see them in small groups shaking their waists. The men too were building their muscles and increasing their arm strength. Somto, on the other hand, had just one thought on his head: how he was going to make sure his love interest doesn't participate in this festival. His first plan was to talk her out of participating, but she told him it wasn't possible because her parents would disown her. He tried to convince her to elope with him, but she didn't agree because Ugegbe loved her parents dearly. He even tried to impregnate her, but she insisted she wanted to wait till she was married before she became intimate with any man. He became frustrated and he thought to himself that he would do whatever it took to make her not participate in the festival. Few days to the festival, Ugegbe started feeling pains in her legs. It was so severe that her legs were swollen and she was unable to walk. As the day drew closer, her situation became worse. Her parents tried all they could to ensure she participated in the festival, but to no avail. The big day came and she was at home. She couldn't move her legs. Her parents too did not attend because she was their only child, and they wanted to watch her and secure a match for her at the festival. But since she was unable to participate, they stayed at home with her. After the festival, a lot of marriages happened. Half of her friends were married. The remaining ones had to wait till the next season. Her parents kept assuring her that she would participate in the next season because they would do all they could to make her walk again. Ugegbe was unbothered about the festival because she didn't want to participate, but she kept wondering if she would ever walk again. Few weeks after the festival, Ugegbe woke up one morning and all the pain suddenly disappeared. She could walk again. Her parents were so happy and she was happy too. In all of this, Somto was not happy because he knew she would get married the next season. Somto and Ugegbe continued their secret romance. They promised never to leave each other. Ugegbe was able to convince Somto to do a blood oath with her. They swore that the day any of them decides to marry someone else, the person would run mad. They were both convinced they could make their relationship work and eventually get married. After the blood oath, Somto felt convinced that truly Ugegbe loved him so much and his insecurities disappeared. Somto had lots of women interested in him. This season was his best even though his performance was worse than his previous seasons. His family pressured him to marry any of the women, but after showing interest by visiting his family, none of the women returned. His parents became worried. They asked Somto on several occasions if he was rude or said anything bad to the women, but he denied having any conversations with them. After waiting for days and none of the women came back nor their families, his father sent words to each of them, but the same response came in from all of their families. Their daughters died mysteriously. This came as a shock to his parents. They began to wonder if something was wrong with their son. They decided they should seek help before the next season. His father, Maazi Agu, went to his best friend Maazi Obinna, who was Ugegbe's father. He told him everything that had happened. Maazi Obinna suggested they visit the chief priest of their village. They decided they would visit him the next Eke market day. The day came and the two friends visited the shrine of the chief priest. Maazi told the chief priest everything, and after waiting on the chief priest to come up with a solution, they were rather disappointed as the chief priest told them they would have to come back as the gods were silent. They left angrily and disappointed. Maazi was so quiet and sad all through their walk back home. His friend tried all he could to cheer him up, but to no avail. He was bent on finding a solution to his son's predicament. He begged his friend not to tell anyone about the situation because if anybody in the village knew, his son will be mocked and chances of him getting married the following seasons would be next to none. Somto and Ugegbe were not aware of the recent developments because their parents kept it from them. Few days later, Maazi went back to the chief priest and the chief priest told him about the relationship going on between his son and his best friend's daughter. That was the reason the women who showed interest in your son died, the chief priest said. Maazi was shocked when the chief priest told him that Ugegbe was the reason the women died. He went ahead and told him that she was possessed by a certain spirit who had come to seek vengeance and that he should not try to interfere in the relationship because they were saving the village from a very tragic fate. The chief priest warned him to be discreet because it was going to be a very tough battle. Immediately he left the shrine, he decided he was going to stop the relationship at all costs. He didn't tell his friend, only him and his wife were aware, and they decided he would visit another native doctor to give them charm to kill Ugegbe because they would not allow her to lead their son astray, and if they could take Ugegbe out of the picture, their son would concentrate more and give them grandchildren. The herbalist gave him a concoction to put in her food. He assured him that immediately Ugegbe ate the food, she would die. On his way back from the native doctor's shrine, a wild beast attacked and devoured him. Maazi's body was discovered 3 days later after his wife raised an alarm about his absence. A search party led by Maazi Obinna, his best friend, was organized to go in search of him. Days after the burial, Somto's mother thought she could finish what her husband had started. She went to Ugegbe and warned her to confess or else she was going to expose her. Ugegbe told her she knew nothing about what she was saying. She left angrily and decided she would go to the king's palace and expose Ugegbe. She woke up the next morning and she couldn't speak. She could feel her mouth moving, but no sound was coming out. She could hear the chickens crawling, but she couldn't hear the sound of what was coming out of her mouth. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She went outside and tried to call out to her son, still she couldn't hear herself. She started weeping. She went back to her hut and laid on her bed. She kept sobbing. Somto went to his mother's hut as he does every morning since the demise of his father. She tried talking but nothing came out of her mouth. That was when she realized she had gone dumb. Somto was an only child too. He had no uncles or aunties apart from Ugegbe's parents, so he hurriedly went to them and explained the situation. They took her to the chief priest, and he told them that it was her husband's foolishness that was about to wipe out their lineage, and he had warned her husband not to take that route, but he did, and it led to his demise. He wouldn't blame the wife because she wasn't the one that was given the instructions, but there was nothing he could do as what was after them was stronger than him. They took her back home disappointed. Ugegbe started frequenting their hut in the guise of taking care of his mother. She would later sneak into Somto's hut so they could be together, but Somto would leave her and go be with his mother. Each time the mother saw Ugegbe, she became scared and always pointed at her. Somto noticed, but he thought it meant nothing. Few weeks passed and the mother eventually died. After his mother's burial, Somto decided it was time he faced reality and he wanted a family of his own. And since he would not be able to marry Ugegbe, he decided it was time to let her go. But there was a problem: the blood oath. Few weeks to the new season and preparations as usual was ongoing. But at the same time, mysterious things were happening in the village of Idu. A lot of villagers went to their farms and their lifeless bodies were brought back. Some went to the stream and returned dead. A few villagers were still missing. This led to hunger in the village as they couldn't go to their farms nor stream. The villagers resorted to staying indoors. The villagers were unhappy. Whenever a villager dies, they took the body to the king to show their grievances. The king finally summoned the chief priests. The chief priest revealed to the king the dark history of Yadera, a maiden who had been brutally mistreated by the villagers. Yadera was consistently rejected during her 3 seasons, ridiculed and ostracized by the community, and ultimately abandoned by her own family. The pain and despair drove her to take her own life. Her body lay unnoticed until the stench of her decay became too great to ignore. Before her tragic end, Yadera vowed to exact revenge on the village that had wronged her so grievously. The king, moved by the chief priest's words, summoned all the villagers to gather and hear the truth about Yadera's fate and her malevolent return. The chief priest repeated his earlier tale, revealing that Yadera's spirit had possessed Ugegbe's body, seeking vengeance against the descendants of those who had wronged her. Though the original perpetrators were long dead, Yadera targeted their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. However, when Ugegbe fell in love with Somto, Yadera's resolve wavered, and she considered sparing the village. Unfortunately, Somto's father's hostile reaction reignited Yadera's fury, leading her to kill him and his wife. The chief priest explained that the blood oath between Ugegbe and Somto had temporarily placated Yadera as she finally experienced the love and acceptance she had always craved. Moved by Yadera's tragic story, the villagers begged the chief priest for a solution, and that was when they noticed Ugegbe was missing. He proposed abolishing the Idu festival and allowing villagers to marry within their own community, promising that this would bring peace and appease Yadera's spirit. While some villagers were hesitant, the chief priest assured them that this change would bring about a new era of peace and harmony. The king refused initially. He thought it was absurd to abandon a tradition they've been practicing for decades because of an ordinary woman. But the chief priest told him she wasn't an ordinary woman. She was a very powerful woman, and if the king refused, she might visit his house next. The king became scared because, just like every other villager, the king loved his family so much, and if abolishing that tradition would bring peace, then so be it. The villagers returned back to their huts, still scared because they did not know what awaits them. They waited for the king to make an official announcement, but he did not. Instead, he asked them to prepare for the Idu festival. They were all skeptical because that wasn't what they wished to hear. Ugegbe was still missing. They had searched all over the kingdom for her, but to no avail. Somto and her parents were worried because despite everything, they loved her dearly. They were so restless. They kept praying that Ugegbe would return to them. Preparations for the festival was ongoing. It was few days left, no death so far. The villagers had gone back to their normal lives, but one question was on the mind of the villagers. How long would this peace last? They thought the king was selfish and wicked, but he had other plans. The day of the festival finally came. The villagers were gathered and they were waiting for the people from other villages to arrive, which was unusual because every year they always met them there. The king noticed the villagers were worried, so he told them that the other people won't be joining them and that going forward the Idu festival will be celebrated by the people of Idu alone and it won't be a marriage contest anymore. But men and maidens of marriageable age will be joined at the festival yearly. This season they started with the men and maidens who were in the third seasons and those that were considered too old to get married. The villagers were filled with joy as the older maidens were eventually getting married, and their dreams of being able to marry each other was becoming a reality. They were still celebrating when a hunter brought Ugegbe to the village square. They were all shocked. Her parents rushed to her, including Somto. Her clothes were torn and she was so weak. She looked up at her parents and apologized to them. The chief priest told them that they shouldn't worry. Ugegbe will be all right. She was weak because the spirit of Yadera had left her. After the festival, they all went to their various houses. After a while, Ugegbe woke up and saw her parents were sitting beside her. She looked in confusion at her parents. They were so happy to see her, and that made her wonder how long she was asleep for. They thought they had lost her. Ugegbe kept asking her parents what was wrong, but they just hugged her. The next day, Somto visited Ugegbe, and she was overjoyed to see him. Her parents had instructed him to keep her past ordeal a secret, but he couldn't help but gaze at her with concern. Ugegbe noticed his curiosity and asked about his parents, only to learn that they had passed away. She was shocked and sought answers, but Somto hesitated, saying it was a long story. Meanwhile, the king had summoned Somto and Ugegbe to the palace, along with her parents to discuss their future together. The chief priest revealed that the gods were not displeased with the couple, but instead their union was destined to save them from a great calamity. The king asked if they still desired to marry, and they affirmed their love. The king generously offered to sponsor their wedding, and the path was cleared for their union. Somto and Ugegbe tied the knot a few weeks later, and their union became the most talked about event in town. They earned the respect and admiration of the entire community. The couple lived a joyous and fulfilling life together. Their love story ended in a blissful happily ever after. Thank you for watching. I would love to hear your opinion on this video in the comment section, and please don't forget to like and share this video. You can also support me by subscribing to my channel and turn on the post notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my updates. Thank you. Bye.